Killing Hindi, Severing Dharma. The silent sabotage of a civilization written by case in the language shapes identity, and Hindi has long been the civilizational lifeline of Hindu Dharma and Bharat. Yet what ought to serve as a unifying force for the nation has long been unfairly demonized under the pretext of protecting regional languages, federalism, and secularism. Language is not merely a means of communication. It is the carrier of culture, consciousness, and dharmic continuity, the thread that connects people to their past, their heritage, and their dharma. In Bharat, where civilization is as much a spiritual expression as a social one, language, especially Hindi and Sanskrit, has long served as a bridge across generations, scriptures, and identities. Yet today, this very bridge is being systematically dismantled in the name of secularism, federalism, or regional autonomy. What is overlooked in this linguistic onslaught is not just a tool of expression, but the living artery of Hindu civilization. The protest against Hindi is not new, but it has intensified in recent times. Under the three-language formula introduced in the National Education Policy, NEP, 2020, states like Maharashtra, Tamil Nadu, and Karnataka have voiced strong objections, claiming that Hindi is being imposed at the expense of regional languages and state autonomy. While the roots of this opposition, tied to the Aryan invasion theory, colonial influence, and politicized linguistic identity, have been discussed in detail elsewhere on this platform, this article turns to a different but crucial aspect. It explores how resistance to Hindi undermines Hindu Dharma, severs Indians from their spiritual and cultural roots, and disrupts civilizational continuity. It also examines the Union's constitutional duty to promote Hindi under Article 351 and the consequences of state-level resistance to this national responsibility. Article 351. Hindi as a bridge, not a barrier. The Indian Constitution, a beacon of unity and diversity, carefully addresses the nation's linguistic plurality. Part 17, covering Articles 343 to 351, outlines the framework for languages. Within this, Article 351 stands out as a special directive duty placed on the Union to promote the growth and development of Hindi, so it may serve as a medium of expression for Bharat's composite culture. It shall be the duty of the Union to promote the spread of the Hindi language, to develop it so that it may serve as a medium of expression for all the elements of the composite culture of India. Article 351. Article 351 envisions a Hindi that expands not by displacing regional languages, but by drawing strength from them, primarily from Sanskrit and secondarily from the languages listed in the 8th schedule. It reflects the constitutional goal of fostering linguistic harmony while advancing a shared medium of communication rooted in Indian tradition. This is not a mere symbolic provision. It is a vision for national unity, recognizing language as a cultural bond in a richly diverse society. Hindi, enriched by Sanskrit and other Indian languages, was meant to be the living, evolving voice of Bharat's civilizational spirit. However, this constitutional mandate is increasingly being undermined by political opportunism and narrow, linguistic parochialism. The challenges facing Hindi today do not come from foreign forces, but from within. In many parts of Bharat, especially the southern states, Hindi faces neglect, manipulation, and even open hostility. Here, regional identity politics are often used to resist what is, in fact, a union responsibility, not a state one. When states undermine the center, Article 351 clearly places the responsibility to promote Hindi on the union, not the states. It is a central obligation, a directive intended to nurture cultural integration and linguistic unity across Bharat's diverse landscape. However, in light of recent protests against Hindi, a crucial constitutional question emerges. What are the implications if a state actively hinders or obstructs the Union's ability to carry out this duty? This dilemma is not merely theoretical, it is unfolding in real time. Through the three-language formula, the Center is attempting to fulfill its Article 351 mandate by promoting the use of Hindi in education. However, states like Maharashtra and Tamil Nadu, citing regional identity and linguistic pride, have opposed these efforts. In Maharashtra, political pressure and strong resistance forced the state government to withdraw its decision to make Hindi compulsory from Class 1 to 5 at the primary school level. This confrontation highlights a significant constitutional deficiency. Nowhere does the Constitution provide a clear remedy or enforcement mechanism if the Union is obstructed in carrying out its special directive. Nor is there any precedent outlining what recourse the Union has when a state actively blocks its constitutionally mandated duty under Article 351. As a result, the directive risks becoming toothless, reduced to symbolic value rather than a practical enforcement tool. This not only weakens the role of Hindi as a unifying civilizational medium, but also erodes the very intent and authority of the Constitution in promoting linguistic integration. Without an effective remedy, the Union's constitutional obligation remains unfulfilled. Article 351 and the missing right to enforce in jurisprudence, it is often said that every duty comes with a corresponding right. Here, we encounter a constitutional anomaly. The Union is entrusted with a duty under Article 351 to promote Hindi, but who holds the corresponding right to demand its enforcement? Is it the citizens, the linguistic majority, or the cultural inheritors of Dharmic civilization? This ambiguity has allowed regional politicians, often backed by anglicized elites, to systematically obstruct efforts to promote Hindi, secure in the knowledge that no clear legal remedy exists. Against such resistance, the result is a gradual erosion of our civilizational connect. Unlike justiciable fundamental rights, where citizens possess enforceable claims and the state has a duty to uphold them, Article 351 is a directive. But its neglect carries real, far-reaching consequences. A generation Hindu by birth, yet alien by intellect. A society that reveres the Gita, but cannot read it without Western filters. English hegemony and the elite disconnect. While some states reject Hindi in the name of regional pride, India's English-educated elite actively undermines it due to a lingering colonial mindset. Today, English in Bharat is more than just a language. It has become a marker of privilege, power, and social status. Unfortunately, this comes at the cost of civilizational rootedness. Many argue that English is the language of opportunity and global engagement, and that may be true. But can it also serve as the language of spirituality, of rooted identity, of shared civilizational memory? More critically, can a nation where only 10% of the population is fluent in English truly adopt it as a common medium of communication? The answer is a clear no. The continued neglect of Hindi has led to a growing number of individuals, particularly among urban Hindus, who neither speak, read, nor understand Hindi, let alone Sanskrit. Worse still, rather than feeling a sense of loss or disconnect, many wear this ignorance as a badge of superiority, taking pride in their command of English while looking down on Hindi with disdain. This linguistic alienation leads to a deeper cultural and civilizational disconnection. Because of this language gap, many Hindus are unable to read Dharmic texts, whether in their original Sanskrit or in Hindi translations. As a consequence, their understanding of Hindu Dharma is filtered through English translations, many of which are distorted, limited in depth, or framed through Western lenses. Spiritual cost of linguistic disconnect for a practicing Hindu. The inability to understand Hindi or Sanskrit is not just a linguistic gap, it is a spiritual disconnection. Vast portions of Hindu literature, the Vedas, Puranas, Upanishads, Bhakti poetry, and saint literature, are primarily available in Sanskrit or Hindi. Without access to these languages, Hindus must rely on English translations, many of which are shaped by Western biases, colonial vocabulary, and civilizational misinterpretations. Several key concepts lose their original meaning when translated from Sanskrit or Hindi into English. Dharma becomes religion, stripping it of its richness as cosmic order, social duty, spiritual law, and way of life. Sampradaya becomes denomination, reducing sacred spiritual lineages to corporate-like labels. Moksha becomes salvation, turning inner liberation of consciousness into a transactional afterlife reward. When Hindus engage with such translations without the semantic depth of Hindi or Sanskrit, they begin, often, unknowingly, to perceive Hindu Dharma through Abrahamic or Western frameworks. This not only distorts understanding but weakens their connection to tradition, leaving them spiritually estranged from their own heritage. From constitutional duty to civilizational necessity, had Article 351 been implemented in full spirit, a vast section of Bharat's population would today be fluent in Hindi, with direct access to civilizational literature in its original form or in Sanskrit-rooted translations. The linguistic ecosystem envisioned by the Constitution, a Hindi enriched by Sanskrit and supported by regional languages, would have safeguarded both national unity and regional cultural identities. Instead, we are witnessing the opposite. Hostility to Hindi has increasingly become a proxy for hostility to Hindu Dharma. Those who oppose Hindi in public education or government often extend their opposition to temple traditions, Sanskrit learning, Vedic rituals, and Dharmic education. This is not merely a linguistic debate, it is a civilizational assault. We must reject the notion that promoting Hindi is communal or that supporting Sanskrit is regressive. Such narratives stem from deep-rooted self-alienation and post-colonial inferiority. It is time for Hindus and all Indians to stop apologizing for their own linguistic and cultural identity. If Hindus do not understand their own scriptures and continue to depend on distorted translations and colonial frameworks, the civilizational disconnect will only deepen and may soon become irreversible. The myth of regional language erosion, it is crucial to remember that India is not a federation of independent states like the USA. It is a union of states with a centralizing tendency. Its constitution leans more towards a strong center. This structure reflects a deep recognition that Bharat's unity depends on shared civilizational values, not just political agreements. Promoting a common language like Hindi is not anti-federal, nor is it an attack on regional languages. Articles 29, 30, 350A, and 350B of the Constitution provide sufficient safeguards to regional and minority languages. Rather, it is a step towards national integration, an attempt to build linguistic unity throughout India. If every state overemphasizes its own regional language while sidelining Hindi, meant to serve as a unifying link language, we risk breaking the nation into isolated linguistic silos, promoting fragmentation instead of fostering integration. The promotion of Hindi under Article 351 is not an imposition but a constitutional bridge, a thread that weaves plural identities into a shared civilizational fabric. The Union's efforts to promote Hindi are not a violation of federalism. They align with the integrative vision of our ancestors and constitution makers, who saw Hindi as a natural vehicle for expressing Bharat's civilizational culture. The NEP 2020 and Renewed Resistance, the National Education Policy, 2020, proposes the three.
Traction. 2. Mamdani's Hindu hate label, video timestamp. 1455. Host, let's now turn to another related issue. Why is it?
Language formula, aiming for every child to learn 2 Indian languages and 1 international language, typically English. For most states, this would mean Hindi, a regional language, and English. This formula represents a sincere attempt to strike a balance between regional pride and national unity. Yet, opportunistic political parties misrepresent it, portraying the promotion of Hindi as a saffron imposition in a secular India. This is simply not true. What Article 351 envisions, and what the NEP 2020 seeks to implement, is a harmonious national vision where diversity is respected, but directed toward unity. It does not deny regional languages. It integrates them into a broader cultural framework. Yet, states like Maharashtra and Tamil Nadu, among others, are refusing to implement this formula when it includes Hindi. Instead, they promote either an English regional model or, in some cases, rely entirely on English instruction. The consequence is a growing generation of Hindus who know neither Sanskrit nor Hindi, leaving them disconnected from their scriptures, saints, stories, and spiritual heritage. Teaching in Sanskrit or Hindi is not anti-secular in the landmark case of Aruna Roy and others v. Union of India. The Supreme Court dismissed the argument that teaching Sanskrit in schools violates secularism. Instead, the court upheld Sanskrit's cultural and civilizational significance in Bharat, asserting that secularism does not mean alienation from indigenous heritage. It emphasized the role of Sanskrit in preserving India's culture and values, noting that Sanskrit is the mother of most Indian languages and a language of profound wisdom. Similarly, in Santosh Kumar and others v. Secretary, Ministry of Human Resource Development. The apex court emphasized the role of Sanskrit in preserving and promoting Indian heritage and culture. If Sanskrit is the root of most Bharatiya languages, then Hindi is its living branch, spoken, understood, and used across the length and breadth of Bharat. If Sanskrit has been judicially recognized for its contribution to national identity and is not seen as communal or in violation of secularism, then how can Hindi, deeply infused with the Sanskritic spirit, be viewed any differently? Shouldn't the same constitutional logic apply to Hindi, especially when debating the NEP 2020 or the
There.
In the Aruna Roy judgment, the Supreme Court clearly
Control large swathes of land or operate parallel education systems without regulation. Try practicing Islam publicly in those countries in ways that challenge state authority. Celebrate Eid publicly in a
both legal precedent and constitutional vision support the view.
Again. Yet in India, Muslims enjoy complete religious freedom, often at the expense of state neutrality. So when someone claims Muslims are oppressed in India or living under a fascist Hindu regime, it's not just misleading, it's intellectually dishonest. The problem is this: Mamdani and others from his ideological camp are not interested in facts. They're interested in building a permanent narrative of victimhood. And unfortunately, that narrative thrives on lies because the truth doesn't support it. And here's the irony. If Muslims in India continue to abuse the extraordinary freedoms they enjoy, instead of appreciating them, they may eventually lose them. And if that happens, they'll have no one to blame but themselves. Host, laughing, thank you, Omar G. So what you're essentially saying is, if Hindus are fascist, they're so inept they don't even know how to practice fascism properly? Omar Ghazi, laughing, exactly. They don't. Ursham Malik, let me add something here. I actually find it quite amusing, almost absurd, when practicing Muslims or those who identify as Muslims accuse others of being fascist or intolerant. I've spent years documenting heretics, dissenters, and apostates across different Muslim societies and continents. From the very inception of Islam, there have been internal critics, and yet these individuals have been relentlessly persecuted. Mainstream Islamic societies don't even tolerate their own dissenters, let alone outsiders. Groups like the Ahmadis, for example, are labeled heretics and often face institutional discrimination in Muslim-majority countries. So, for Muslims to accuse Hindus of intolerance is ironic, because Hindus, by and large, do tolerate difference. Many of them even accept Muslims as fellow seekers of truth, just with a different approach to the divine. That level of pluralism simply doesn't exist in most Islamic traditions. It's baffling that in today's age, when we have access to so much information, technology, and awareness, people still fall for such blatant hypocrisy. Mamdani should have been called out long ago. But it's easy to label Hindus fascists, precisely because they're tolerant. They don't react with the same aggression that others might. So yes, as Omar said, Hindus may be the weakest fascists in history, if that's what you want to call it, because they've never actually practiced oppression. It's all propaganda, a narrative that's been pushed for decades. Arif Ajakia, let me add to that. When I first moved to Belgium in 1990, I had a dispute with a local social worker, a blonde woman, and I, coming from Pakistan, didn't really understand what the word fascist meant. So I called her a fascist. She calmly explained to me that in Belgium, calling someone a fascist without evidence is actually a crime. That was a moment of learning for me. Now compare that with what we're seeing in New York, a mayoral
while masquerading as defenders of linguistic freedom. The resistance to Hindi is increasingly driven by those with open disdain for Hindu civilization, those who label Sanskrit as Brahmanical, who mock mantras as superstition, and who brand temples as regressive. They understand that Hindi is a bridge from Sanskrit to the masses, from the Vedas to the villages. And so, they attack it to undermine the transmission of Dharma itself. In doing so, they are not only alienating Hindus from their rich heritage, but also endangering national cohesion. By opposing Hindi, they are not merely resisting a language, they are severing the arteries of civilizational continuity. Their goal is to uproot Hindus from their literature, Bhakti traditions, and sacred texts. This is not just language politics, it is cultural sabotage. Article 351 directs the Union to promote Hindi not out of linguistic chauvinism, but because no nation can endure without a unifying cultural thread. Final reflection. The civilizational case for Hindi to reduce Hindi to a mere language dispute is to miss the deeper forces shaping Bharat's future. This is not a debate of federalism versus centralization, North versus South, or religion versus secularism. It is about whether Bharat can preserve its cultural memory, civilizational identity, and unifying thread. Hindi, enriched by Sanskrit and supported by regional tongues, is not a threat to diversity. It is what holds that diversity together. Denying its space in education, governance, and public life is not just rejecting a language, it is silencing the most accessible voice of our heritage. The sidelining of Hindi, often in the name of modernity, secularism, or federalism, is severing the civilizational roots of Hindu society, alienating young Indians from their scriptures and traditions. It also undermines national unity by denying a shared platform for communication, especially among those outside the English-speaking elite. If Bharat is to grow as a strong, united, and self-aware nation, Hindi must be restored not just as a medium of governance and education, but as a cultural lifeline. Without it, we become a house with many rooms but no foundation. This is not a debate about whether children should learn Hindi, Tamil, or Marathi. It is a struggle for Bharat's civilizational soul. To kill Hindi is to sever Hindu Dharma from its people. To reject Hindi is to disconnect Bharat from its past and blur its future. Let us not kill Hindi in the name of diversity, nor cut Hindu Dharma in the name of secularism. Let us choose unity, with Hindi as the living thread that binds the soul of Bharat.